The security guard's hand pressed firmly against Evelyn Carter's shoulder, pushing her back from the pristine marble entrance of the Whitmore estate. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to use the service entrance around back. This door is for family and invited guests only." Evelyn, a 67-year-old retired teacher wearing her best Sunday dress and clutching a small gift bag, looked up at the imposing man in confusion. "But I was invited. My son Marcus is." "I don't care who your son is, lady. You don't belong here." The guard's voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who'd made assumptions based on her appearance, her age, her race. The help enters through the kitchen. Behind him, through the glass doors, Evelyn could see the glittering party in full swing. The Whitmore family's annual charity gala, where her son Marcus was supposed to be the guest of honor, where he was supposed to announce the biggest merger in his company's history, a $1.2 billion acquisition that would make the Whitmores even richer. "Sir, there's been a mistake," Evelyn said, her voice trembling but dignified. "I'm Marcus Carter's mother. I'm here for the ceremony." The guard laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the marble columns. "Marcus Carter, the Marcus Carter, right? And I'm Warren Buffett." He gestured dismissively toward the side of the mansion. "Service entrance. Now, before I call the real security." What the guard didn't know what he was about to discover in the most expensive way possible was that Marcus Carter wasn't just any guest. He was the CEO of Carter Industries, the man who'd built a tech empire from nothing, and he was exactly 12 minutes away from walking through those same doors to sign the deal that would change both families' fortunes forever. More importantly, he was a son who'd learned everything about dignity, respect, and standing up for what's right from the woman now being humiliated at the front door. Marcus Carter's Bentley pulled up to the valet stand just as his phone buzzed with a text from his mother, "Running a bit late, sweetheart. Having some trouble at the front door." Something cold settled in his stomach. He'd specifically told the Whitmores that his mother would be arriving separately, had even sent them her photo to ensure smooth entry. Evelyn Carter was his plus one, his anchor, the woman who'd raised him in a one-bedroom apartment and taught him that success meant nothing if you forgot where you came from. He stepped out of the car, his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, impeccable, diamond cufflinks catching the light. The valet recognized him immediately. Marcus Carter was Forbes' youngest self-made billionaire under 40, a man whose face graced magazine covers and whose company had revolutionized cloud computing. But as he approached the front entrance, he saw a scene that made his blood run cold. His mother stood at the bottom of the steps, no longer trying to argue with the guard who towered over her. She'd pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, and Marcus could see the defeat in her posture. The way she'd accepted the humiliation because she'd been taught, like so many of her generation, that sometimes you just had to endure. "Mom," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the marble expanse. Evelyn turned, her face lighting up despite the tears threatening to spill. "Marcus, oh honey, I'm so sorry. I think there's been some confusion." The security guard's face went white as he recognized Marcus Carter, not from magazines or news reports, but from the briefing he'd received that morning. The briefing that had specifically mentioned that the guest of honor would be arriving with his mother. "Mr. Carter," the guard stammered, suddenly finding his manners. There was a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Marcus said, his voice deadly quiet as he walked up the steps. "You saw a black woman in a dress that didn't cost $1,000, and you assumed she was the help. You didn't even ask her name." Inside the mansion, the party continued in blissful ignorance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the crowd of billionaires, politicians, and celebrities who'd gathered to witness what the Wall Street Journal had called the merger of the century. Richard Whitmore III, the family patriarch, spotted Marcus through the crowd and approached with arms spread wide. "Marcus, there you are. We were beginning to worry. The contracts are ready, just waiting for your signature." Marcus didn't smile back. "We need to talk privately." Something in his tone made Richard pause. At 73, Richard Whitmore had built his family's fortune through real estate and technology investments, but he'd also learned to read people. The young man standing before him wasn't the same eager entrepreneur who'd pitched this deal 6 months ago. "Of course," Richard said, guiding Marcus toward his private study. "Is everything all right?" Marcus waited until the door closed before speaking. "Your security guard just humiliated my mother. Told her she had to use the service entrance because she didn't belong here." Richard's face flushed. "Marcus, I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding, was it?" Marcus's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Because, from where I'm standing, it looks like your security team saw a 67-year-old black woman and automatically assumed she was staff, even after she told them she was my mother." "I'll have a word with security," Richard said quickly. "It won't happen again. Now, shall we get back to the party?" We have a lot of important people waiting to witness this signing. But Marcus was already shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about your security guard. This is about what your family represents, what this company represents. Richard's expression hardened. Now hold on. Don't you dare lecture me about respect. My family has been in business for over a century. We've donated millions to charity, including organizations that help people like what Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. The older man stopped, realizing he'd stepped into dangerous territory. I didn't mean yes, you did. Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact. Janet. Yes, it's Marcus. Cancel the Whitmore deal, immediately. Have the lawyers draft a statement, citing irreconcilable differences in company values. Richard's face went pale. Marcus, you can't be serious. This is $1 billion deal, over a security guard. No, Marcus said, pocketing his phone. Over the fact that you think $1 billion should make me overlook the disrespect shown to my mother. Over the fact that you think success means I should forget where I came from. 24 hours earlier, Marcus had been in his corner office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, putting the finishing touches on the Whitmore deal. His assistant, Sarah, had knocked on the door with a concerned expression. Mr. Carter, your mother called. She's worried about tomorrow night. She wants to know if she should take a cab or if you're sending a car. Marcus had smiled. The same smile he'd worn as a kid when Evelyn would worry about parent-teacher conferences or school events. Tell her I'm sending the Bentley, and Sarah. Make sure the Whitmores know she's coming. I want the red carpet treatment. He'd built Carter Industries from nothing, a one-room apartment where he'd coded his first program while his mother worked double shifts as a school janitor to keep them afloat. Every success, every milestone, every victory had been shared with the woman who'd believed in him when no one else would. The Whitmore deal was supposed to be the crown jewel of his career, a merger that would combine his cutting-edge cloud technology with their vast infrastructure network, creating a tech giant that could compete with Amazon and Microsoft. But as he'd prepared for the gala, Marcus had remembered something his mother used to tell him: success isn't about how much money you make, baby. It's about how you treat people when you don't have to treat them well. The Whitmores had failed that test before the ink was even dry on the contracts. By the time Marcus returned to the party, word had already begun to spread. The tech world was small, and news traveled fast. Phones buzzed with urgent messages. Stock prices fluctuated in after-hours trading. Victoria Whitmore, Richard's daughter and the company's CEO, intercepted Marcus at the bar. You can't do this, she said, her voice barely controlled. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? I know exactly what I'm throwing away, Marcus replied, not bothering to look at her. The question is, do you know what you've lost? Over a security guard? Over a simple mistake? Marcus finally turned to face her. Over the fact that your family's first instinct was to assume the worst about my mother. Over the fact that even now, you're calling it a simple mistake instead of what it really was. Victoria's face reddened. That's not fair. We're not racist. We donate to civil rights organizations. We have diversity initiatives. You have PR campaigns, Marcus corrected. But when it mattered, when my mother, a woman who raised me to be the man you wanted to do business with, showed up at your door, she was treated like garbage. Across the room, other guests had begun to notice the tension. Whispered conversations stopped mid-sentence. The party's energy shifted from celebration to something darker. Richard Whitmore approached, his face grave. Marcus, I've spoken to security. The guard has been fired. We're prepared to make a substantial donation to any charity your mother chooses. Surely we can work this out. But Marcus was already walking toward the exit. You still don't get it, he said over his shoulder. You can't buy your way out of this. Some things aren't for sale. The story broke on TechCrunch 6 hours later. Carter Industries cancels $1.2 billion. Merger after CEO's mother allegedly mistreated at Whitmore Gala. By morning, it was everywhere. CNN, Fox News, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag respect Evelyn. Hashtag dignity over dollars. Hashtag Marcos Carter. The narrative was simple but powerful. A successful black CEO had walked away from the deal of a lifetime to defend his mother's dignity. It was a story that resonated far beyond the tech world, touching on themes of family, respect, and the price of success. But the real story was happening in a small kitchen in South Central Los Angeles, where Evelyn Carter was making breakfast for her son. Just like she had when he was a boy, building computers from spare parts. You didn't have to do that, she said, not looking up from the stove. Cancel the deal. I mean, I've dealt with worse. Marcus sat at the same table where he'd done homework, where he'd mapped out his first business plan, where he'd promised his mother that someday he'd make enough money that she'd never have to worry again. "That's exactly why I had to do it," he said. "Because you've dealt with worse. Because you taught me that dignity isn't negotiable. Because no amount of money is worth forgetting who we are." Evelyn finally turned, her eyes bright with tears. "I'm proud of you, baby. Not because you're rich or famous, but because you're still the same boy who stood up to bullies in elementary school." Outside, news vans lined the street. Marcus's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, competitors, and board members. Carter Industries stock had jumped 15%. On news of the canceled merger, investors saw it as a sign of strong leadership and uncompromising values. But inside the small kitchen, none of that mattered. It was just a mother and son, sharing breakfast, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing they'd done the right thing. 3 months later, Marcus Carter stood in the same spot where his mother had been humiliated. But this time the marble entrance was his. He'd purchased the Whitmore estate at auction after the family's company collapsed in the wake of the scandal. The merger cancellation had been just the beginning. Other companies had followed Marcus's lead, cutting ties with the Whitmores as the story gained momentum. Investors had fled. Stock prices had plummeted. Within weeks, the century-old family business was in ruins. But Marcus hadn't bought the estate for revenge. He'd bought it to transform it. "The Evelyn Carter Center for Dignity and Respect," he announced to the gathered crowd of reporters and community leaders. "A place where young entrepreneurs from underserved communities can access resources, mentorship, and most importantly, the knowledge that they belong anywhere their dreams can take them." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The mansion that had once excluded his mother now bore her name. The front door that had been closed to her was now open to anyone with ambition and a dream. Richard Whitmore himself stood in the crowd, looking older and more fragile than he had just months before. After the ceremony, he approached Marcus. "I want you to know," the older man said, his voice thick with emotion, "I understand now. What I lost wasn't just a business deal. It was my integrity, my family's legacy." Marcus nodded, but his expression remained neutral. "The guard you fired. I hired him." Richard looked surprised. "I gave him a chance to learn, to grow, to understand why what he did was wrong. Because that's what my mother taught me, that everyone deserves a second chance to do better." As the sun set over Los Angeles, Marcus walked through the halls of his new center, past photos of his mother and other unsung heroes who'd raised giants. The walls that had once displayed the portraits of Whitmore patriarchs now showcased the dreams of young entrepreneurs from Watts, Compton, and East L.A. In the end, the story wasn't really about a canceled merger or a humiliated mother or even a billionaire's revenge. It was about the simple truth that Evelyn Carter had taught her son from the beginning. That how you treat people when you don't have to treat them well reveals everything about who you really are. And sometimes, the most powerful statement you can make is walking away from something that everyone else thinks you should want.